Hi, welcome to Make Your Own Rules, the Mavericks Unlimited podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Roy, and this is the place to become your best self, do what you love, and live life on your terms. On this podcast, we speak to Mavericks to inspire us. We aim to get the insight and wisdom from their story to give you the clarity, courage, and confidence that you need to make your own rules. And you know how sometimes you just meet someone who's so effortlessly inspiring, it's unreal? Well, that was my experience with Glenn Elliott. Glenn is the founder of Reward Gateway and the author of Build It, the Rebel Playbook for world-class employee engagement. Glenn is a highly successful entrepreneur. He's also a former engineer whose approach to employee engagement is simple, down-to-earth, and just common sense. To him, engagement isn't some fluffy HR issue, but really is the single most important business improvement tool. As a result, he's a highly sought-after speaker and travels the world championing employee engagement to large companies. As a person, Glenn is grounded, warm and real, and that's what makes him so inspiring. There's no inauthenticity, there's no pretense, and that's what makes him so effective. So with that, let's jump in and see what Glenn had to say. So hi Mavericks, Christian Roy here, again with the Mavericks Unlimited podcast. And this week, I'd like to welcome a very special guest, Mr. Glenn Elliott. Hi Glenn, how are you today?
I'm great, Chris. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you, So for everyone who's listened to our podcast before, you'll know that we've spoken to a lady called Claude Silver, who's one of our good friends, and Glenn was connected to us through Claude. And Glenn has a really fascinating take on a subject that's very close to our heart, which is around employee engagement. So, Glenn, tell us a little bit about your background. Just tell us a little bit about who you are before we kind of dive in.
Okay, so I kind of... I started my life as an engineer, so I'm a computer scientist, really. I'm a software engineer. I did a nearly 10-year corporate career in BT, the phone company, where I kind of learned, when I look back on that time, I realized I'd learned some of the ways that large companies disengage their staff. Although I didn't know it was employee disengagement or engagement at the time.
Right.
I wasn't familiar with the terms. But I left BT after a good 9-10 years, and I set up a series of businesses myself. The latter of which, the most successful of which, was the one that became Reward Gateway. It's a HR tech business. Mm-hmm. It started as an employee benefits business, and it quickly expanded into a wider range of employee engagement things.
Yep.
So kind of I ran that for 11 and a half years. I stood down as CEO last year. And in that 11 and a half years, I'd worked with nearly 2,000 companies around the world, everyone from McDonald's to McKinsey, IBM to Iceland Frozen Foods. I mean, everybody.
Yeah.
Playing a sort of a small role in their own employee engagement strategies. And I kind of learned a lot about people in doing that. And growing Reward Gateway itself, we started with a gang of friends.
Yeah.
I ended 11 and a half years later with 400 staff in 9 countries. So, growing that business, I learned a lot about people, how to create an environment to get the best out of them, where they wanted to do their best work and could do their best work. So I learned about employee engagement and leadership and culture that way. And people have often said to me that I'm not like your classic consultant because I've done it. I've got the greatest knees and the scars of having actually done it myself.
Right.
So I know that nothing actually works like the textbook.
Yeah, of course.
It's a much more messy affair than it looks. So that's kind of me, really.
Okay. And I have to say, I mean, we're sat in Reward Gateway London office, and I think you can tell a lot about an organisation just from looking at how people interact. And this is not your typical workplace, or even just your typical office.
Yeah, people often say that. It's this is the first office that we'd actually designed properly. Every other office until this one, we'd just sort of moved in and threw some laptops on the table, and that was it. But in this office, we tried to really think about how people would work and talk together and behave and communicate together, and how they'd have a really great environment to work in. We've been here for just over 2 years. It's worked really, really well. And we've now rolled this out around the world. So most of our offices now look and feel just like this one, which is great.
Love it. I mean, there's more more colour than you'd find in a typical office here, and it's just a lovely environment.
And it's a bit more like home. I mean, I'm sitting on a sofa right now with my feet up, and there's lots of people around the office I can see sitting on sofas and things. So I guess it's a bit more like home or a sort of comfy hotel than it is your classic office where you're sitting bolt upright in a hard-backed chair for 8-9 hours, looking uncomfortable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Strangely, people don't do their best work when uncomfortable, but that seems to be a revelation to lots of people.
I know, what's that all about? It's bizarre, isn't it? So you've kind of got this, you're in the situation now, you're still the founder, but you're concentrating more on kind of going around really kind of talking about employee engagement, and you wrote a book called
Build It, the Rebel Playbook for Employee Engagement. Yes.
So, and I mean, it's sort of become when I think of the various kind of people leaders I know, it's sort of become a little bit of a Bible. So, you've got Reward Gateway, which you've built, which obviously has a very different approach to engagement. As you say, you're not a typical consultant because you've done it yourself.
Yes.
But also, I guess, as you've engaged with a couple of thousand companies, you've been able to really observe what organisations do, what works, what doesn't work, that kind of thing. And you've sort of come to quite an unusual position. So what does employee engagement mean to you? If you were kind of to define it and kind of what's right and what's wrong with how we perceive that term even, what would you say?
I'm quite straightforward and simple about things. I don't like to get too caught up in jargon and stuff. And I think all employee engagement is about creating an environment where people can do their best work and they want to do their best work. So often we talk about the sort of three things that you see that you need for an employee to be engaged. They need to, one, understand and to some extent believe in and have an interest in the mission or purpose of the organization. So whatever you're doing, whether you're making better workplaces, or you're saving dolphins, or you're producing environmentally friendly carpet, or you're selling clothing, or whatever, that you need to start by saying, do you know what? I think this is a good use of my time, and I think this is a cool thing to do. Yeah. The second thing they need to do is they need to understand how their personal role affects that mission's success. Yeah. So they understand they have to have a role that actually is meaningful. Which is not always the case. Some jobs aren't particularly meaningful, or the meaning is difficult to understand or is lost. So they need to be able to connect what they're doing with success. And then the third thing is they need to deeply and genuinely want the organization to succeed, which sounds kind of obvious, but it's not. It means that on occasion, not all the time, but on occasion, they'll put the organization's needs ahead of their own. Their own short-term needs anyway. And that's about, sometimes you call that going the extra mile, you call that doing the right thing for the customer. Yeah. And I think if you've got those three things, you're probably looking at a member of staff who is engaged. Yeah. But I think that what's important is, I sometimes come across definitions of engagement or discussions about engagement which are very, very absolute. People will always do this and will always do that and will always put the organization's needs ahead. But of course they won't, because we're people, we're human, and I mean, I'm generally a very engaged member of staff, but I have some days when I've just had enough,
Yeah, of course.
And I think, no, I'm going now. And that, whatever that journalist who needs a comment, they'll have to wait until tomorrow, because right now my needs are greater. I've given all I can, and I think that's probably the difference between a long-term engaged company and what can go wrong, which is sometimes people try and run a cult. And I've seen some, unfortunate situations where, a leader has got themselves kind of the wrong end of the stick on engagement, and they've ended up essentially trying to run some sort of cult. And if someone isn't towing the company line on every single matter all the time, then they're not on the bus and they should leave. Yeah. And that's not what it's about. Employee engagement is about caring about work. And if you care about work, sometimes it will really annoy you. You're not going to agree with everything the company does. You're going to be, engaged employees are not deliriously happy all the time.
No, absolutely.
Because sometimes they'll think, God, the company's making a really big mess of this. When they're going to get their act together.
They've got skin in the game at that point.
They've got skin in the game, and they care. And I think that's the thing, is they care about it. And I think if you're in, the sort of, how do you feel you're in an engaged organization? There's kind of good debate, discussion.
Yeah.
Polite arguments.
Yeah.
Because they're examples of they're the things that happen when people care about something and are passionate. If you're ever in a meeting or in a company where there isn't any of that, it's rarely that there's perfect harmony. It's normally that no one gives a toss.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the thing is, it's not only that there's polite debate, but it's safe to have that debate, because sometimes conflict
very
can
good point.
Quite negative as well. So, I mean, employee engagement, it can almost sound like one of those leadership management buzzwords, or, kind of something that corporates talk about, but, startups might not even think about, or that kind of. Why should organizations even give a crap about employee engagement? I know that's
I mean, well, look, I'm different. We're all different. I'm an entrepreneur first. I'm a business person and an entrepreneur.
Yep.
So for me, there's only one reason why you give a stuff about employee engagement. It's because engaged employees build better, stronger, more resilient, more successful organizations. So, it's like if someone's interested in what's the best measure of employee engagement, profit and growth. Yeah, because if you want your organization to grow successfully, navigate what's an incredibly difficult environment for most companies, with things changing, daily and weekly, really, really fast-paced competitors, you need your stuff on side. So that's the reason you do employee engagement. It's not sort of a fluffy initiative you do on the side because you've got some spare time or you think you should do it for the corporate brochure. It is the single most important, most effective business improvement tool that exists, because very, very, very few organizations are not completely dependent on the creativity, decision making, and output of their people.
Right.
I think when Instagram sold to Facebook, we had 14 staff, which is wonderfully unique.
Yeah.
Most of us do not get to build a multi-billion-dollar organization with 14 staff.
No.
And I bet the 14 were highly engaged. Yeah.
You'd think, wouldn't you?
You would. I think, so most of us, our organization is nothing but our people. Interestingly, people are often saying that, and then they do very little to make sure those people are in a great place where they can do their best work, want to do their best work. And that's all employee engagement is about.
Interesting. So, I mean, obviously, certain cultures of organisations, certain types of organisations, are probably going to buy into that more than others. I mean, and what you're saying is personally something I would very much agree with. But there are other business people out there who'd be like, it's actually about margins, or it's actually about technology or whatever else.
But the thing is, it's about margins. So how do you get your margins up? People.
Well, good.
It's about technology. So how do you build the technology that your customers want in 5 years' time? I mean, it ain't going to build itself. How do you have the ideas of what product to build? How do you refine them? How do you fix all the bugs in it? I mean, Reward Gateway is a technology business. Yeah, it's a SaaS product.
Yeah.
It's a technology business. But software does not write itself. It takes 400 staff to build and service that technology, build new features, add new stuff, listen to customers, sell to customers, service customers, renew them, bill them, handle their problems and issues. If you take the staff out, it's just some lines of code that would stop working probably in a few weeks.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think, whenever I meet, and I do occasionally meet CEOs who say, well, the polite word is odd. The honest word is stupid things. And they say, oh, yeah, you're that fluffy guy, aren't you? Like, I just look at the numbers. I'm a numbers guy. And I just don't understand fundamentally how that works. You want your business to grow, so you're going to stare into Excel or Google Sheets. Because anything you do all that is just a mathematical model of the output of people.
Right.
Yeah. Like, if you're looking at your P&L budget for next year, and you say, right, I'm going to add £500,000 of revenue from this new product we're going to build that's going to do X, Y, and Z. Great. So you've made the spreadsheet. Now someone's got to design the product and write the code,
right,
and test it and refine it and iterate it. And
sell
who's going to do that and sell it? And who's going to do that? People are going to do it.
Funny that, isn't it?
Yeah, and and if you're a standard organization, if you're a bog standard average organization, 70% of your staff, according to the Gallup data, are not engaged. So they're coming to work, they're being paid, they're doing the basics, they're keeping their head down, they're definitely not going to get fired, but they don't really care.
Right.
They don't really care about you and your business. They don't really care about the customer that much, and they're not bringing their whole selves to work.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big waste. So for me, it's not about what does employee engagement cost or why should we do it. It's about, are you aware of the vast destructive cost of employee disengagement that's already in your business?
And I would guess that a lot of organisations don't even necessarily think in those terms.
Some don't, definitely, absolutely.
So often, Reward Gateway's worked with a couple of thousand organisations and I'm sure that a lot of people, a lot of CEOs, for example, would probably agree with what you're saying. In terms of, we all know that actions speak louder than words. In terms of where kind of business is at right now, how much would you say organisations, large, small, are actually really engaging with tackling employee engagement as opposed to paying
engagement?
Yeah, exactly, as opposed to paying lip service.
Well, I'd love to paint a rosy, positive picture, but I don't think there is one. Is the truth. Gallup have been surveying employee engagement for, I think, 30, 35 years. And I always go to the Gallup data for the simple reason it's the world's biggest data set.
Absolutely.
So we're not talking about like someone's knocked up a survey monkey here. It's like there's 30 million data points going back 30 years. And also their data correlates with everybody else's data. So it's, there isn't much margin of disagreement in the employee engagement data around the world, no matter whose data you look at. And what Gallup find is, and there's a small amount of difference between countries, but it's not as much as you'd expect. About 70% of people are disengaged at work, so only 30 are engaged. And that number just isn't really changing much. I think, at best, if you kind of scrabble around in the data, you might find a 1 percentage point improvement in the last 5 years. Wow, it's not much.
That's incredible.
And I think it's interesting, it's because you've got some people who are actually, in the industry and in HR and they're kind of almost getting employee engagement fatigue. They think they've done it and nothing works. So you've got people inventing new terms for it, like, it's not about employee engagement, it's about employee experience. Or it's not about employee experience, it's about organizational health. Or it's not about organization, it's about something else. And the truth is, when you look past the buzzword on the front of the book and you read the stuff, there's no difference between employee experience really and employee engagement.
No,
and they can't be, because we're talking about human motivation.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no, there isn't really any opportunity for having a new, completely radical view on it, because human beings haven't changed. The problem we've got is that people are doing a lot of talking about employee engagement and they're not fundamentally changing their businesses. So we're still largely running businesses how we ran them 100 years ago.
Right.
With a management hierarchy, a top-down approach. Most organizations treat their staff assuming that their staff are criminals and are going to steal from them if they're not controlled.
Wow.
Which is why the classic employee handbook or the employment contract looks so grim.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And most companies, they under communicate with their staff. They don't trust them. They bring in far too much process and control, so they reduce jobs down, so they've got no freedom. If there's no freedom to make mistakes, there's no growth.
Yeah.
There's no growth, there's no development, no matter how much training you've got. And they're the things that disengage staff.
Yeah.
So if you want to change that, you've got to fundamentally change how you treat people at work. Sticking at employee engagement fun day on the end of things it's fine, but it's not going to make any difference if you don't change how you treat your staff.
Yeah. Absolutely. So grim thinking, as it were, for the time being.
Well, it's interesting. It's kind of grim thinking in the progress, but what's maybe the optimistic view is the changes that you need to make to your organization are actually quite straightforward. They're just completely counterintuitive and not what people think business is. So, if you people think business is about, coming to work in a suit, dressed a certain way and behaving a certain way.
Yeah.
And, climbing the greasy pole on the management hierarchy and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, you can do that. And if you do that, you'll end up with 30% staff engagement.
Yeah.
It's fine. Yeah. Whereas actually, the things which make organizations really, really sane and work are being honest with everybody, compulsively honest, explaining what's going on properly, having really, really great two-way communication, creating a culture where it's safe to challenge and question and disagree and argue and debate and stuff, creating jobs that have got freedom to fall over and make mistakes in so that you can learn and develop and try new things. Having a culture where people regularly say thank you to each other and appreciate each other. And where there's a culture of being grateful for people's contribution rather than saying, stuff like, well, you're paid, though that should be enough. Like I was talking to an HR director just a couple of weeks ago, and she said, oh, my CEO, he thinks that, staff get a salary and that they should be grateful for it and that's all that they should get.
Oh, my God.
And unfortunately, it's just a very reductive way to run a business, and it doesn't treat people as humans. It assumes people are an effective component of a machine, which they're just not. So if you can treat people like that, thousands of businesses, millions of businesses treat people just like that.
Yeah.
And that's why they've got 30% staff engagement.
Yeah.
And if you want to have more, you just need to change how you think, which is to think, do you know what? I'm really lucky to have this team here. They're coming and I want them to give their all to work. And if you think, actually, I'm not lucky to have this team, some of this team isn't very good, well, get rid of them then, get them out. Because, one of the big things that people say to me sometimes is, oh, Glenn, you talk about trust and minimal process and job freedom, but I can't trust my staff. I'm like, okay, well, don't employ them then. Because if you can't trust the person that's working for you, they shouldn't be working for you.
Right.
You need to exit them and you need to employ people you can trust. Yeah. So it's a complete, it's kind of, it's mismanagement to say, well, this is the workforce I've got, so I don't trust them, so I'm going to just reduce myself to the lowest common denominator and treat everyone poorly.
Yeah.
You need to build a great team and then treat them really well.
I mean, as you say, it's pretty simple when you actually put it in those terms.
Sometimes I do a lot of conference speaking.
Yeah.
And I quite often, halfway through my talk, my keynote, have this kind of imposter syndrome fear where I just think, oh my God, what I'm talking about is blindingly obvious and I'm a complete fraud. Because this is just common sense that we learned as children. And then afterwards, someone I always get people come up to me afterwards and say, oh wow, Glenn, that was inspirational, that was amazing, thank you so much. And I'm like, really? Was it really? Yeah, okay, thank you, it's nice to hear that. Because it's really quite straightforward.
Yeah.
We're just not doing it. And it's not even expensive to do. Most of it's an attitude of mind rather than let's write a large check for some engagement technology or system or something.
Well, I mean, one of the things that really strikes me about this and strikes me about you is, forgive me for painting a stereotype of an engineer here, but you're not an HR fluffy, kind of tea and sympathy type person. You've come from an engineering background. You're a tech entrepreneur, and yet you've got this very human-centered approach to. And something else that just struck me. I said it to Will as I walked in, and Will is your PA. I went into the loo here, and this is going to sound really good. And literally, it's the only place I think I've ever been into where everyone who came in and out of the loo said, "Hi, how you doing?" I'm a complete stranger, but it's like, "Hi, how you doing?"
Yeah,
that sounds really small. It's a really small point, but
yes.
it points to something. It really points to something.
Yeah, I think it points to a workplace where people are comfortable and happy. It doesn't mean that they don't work hard, because they do, because they're focused and dedicated too, but they're relaxed. And it's interesting. I went to. I spend a lot of my time. Actually, spend a lot of my time working at home now, and I spend the rest of my time in the Reward Gateway office. And I only spend a little bit of time in corporate offices, actually. And it's easy to forget what corporate offices are like. And I was in one recently. I went to meet somebody, and I did, and it felt very different. The foyer was larger than I think our entire office, with two receptionists stuck in the middle of it by themselves, and you could kind of hear a pin drop.
Yeah.
The meeting rooms were huge and vast and far too big for what we needed. But what was interesting, I thought, was that the people I met, who had both been with the organisation for quite a while and were quite senior, their kind of their manner with each other was kind of like walking on eggshells. You know what I mean? And I just come from a training session in our office where I was walking through the engagement bridge, my engagement model, with 7 of our client services staff, and we were sitting on beanbags on the floor with a whiteboard pen, and we just like did 2.5 hours of semi-structured conversation. And I gone from there to this corporate office where these 2 senior people were, you know, all dressed up in their suits, and were like, just tiptoeing around the issues, and you know, one was more senior than the other, and they were clearly frightened to upset the way things go, and it just felt so hideously dysfunctional.
Oh boy.
You know, and these are nice people that work for a nice company, but it just felt very, very wrong. So yeah, I think, you know, one of the things when you work on an engaged culture, one of the byproducts of it, I guess, is one of the steps towards it maybe is, you know, people feel comfortable at work.
Yeah.
And if they're comfortable at work, physically comfortable and mentally comfortable in a safe space, that's when they, you know, they verbalize their ideas and their thoughts and their comments. You know, as I meet people who say, you know, we're often asking clients what their objectives are for their strategic objectives in HR and people, and you know, a common one or a not uncommon one is we need to be more innovative.
Yeah.
You know, and people will say, my staff never have any ideas, and it's not true. Their staff have got ideas, they just don't share them.
No, of course
not. But it's, you know, in any organisation, including this one, if you want to know the ideas that will make a difference, you just need to get to the frontline customer service, and they'll tell you everything that's wrong.
Absolutely, get to the coalface, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, always. The question isn't have they got the ideas. The question is, have you put them in a position where they want to share them?
Absolutely.
Where they feel where they can care to share them, they feel safe to share them, and they think it's useful. And most of the time, the answer to that is no.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean putting a suggestion box on the wall, does
it?
No.
I mean, it's a start. You could do that; it wouldn't hurt, but it's not the key thing.
No, absolutely. I think, you know, one of the things that strikes me, you know, part of the reason why I was interested in talking to you, you know, from the Mavericks point of view, is you come across very down to earth. You've got, as you say, it's almost kind of common sense stuff. And I think a lot of people think Mavericks are people who are out there. They are. It's actually just someone who goes against what is the given wisdom. But it doesn't necessarily mean you're completely out there. As you're saying, what you're saying is actually kind of common sense in a certain kind of way.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, when we named the book, so the book came out in February, so we probably named it quite a while ago, actually, maybe about a year and a half ago. And Wiley, my publisher, were obsessed with calling it Build It because it follows a bridge model.
Yeah.
And then I didn't really like that name. I wanted to give it a sort of a strong subheading which would mitigate it. And we wanted it to be a practical book, which was, you know, we wanted it to be inspirational, but also pragmatic examples. I'm a pragmatist. I wanted people to put it down and say, right, I've got 3 ideas I'm going to do on Monday. So we had this idea of calling it a playbook. And then there was a big debate internally about whether it was a Rebel Playbook or just a playbook. And I ended up running a little survey internally in Reward Gateway just to ask people what they thought. And people were quite split. You know, it was about 50-50 between thinking we should use the word rebel and we shouldn't. And the people who thought we shouldn't were worried that some of our clients just weren't rebellious and would be freaked out and would be frightened and turned off by it. So I went home for that weekend, and my job was to decide, is it a Rebel Playbook or is it a playbook?
Yeah.
And I thought about it for a couple of days, and then it hit me when I woke up on a Sunday morning. You know, often you wake up and the answer's in your head clearly from sleeping. And I woke up and I thought it has to be a Rebel Playbook because it's the status quo of how we do business that's caused the state of employee disengagement.
Yeah.
So if you're not prepared to rebel against normal business practice, you will not get anywhere in employee engagement. But you're right in that it's business practice that's wrong. The way we treat people at work is wrong. We wouldn't, you know, if you treated people at home like you treat people at work, you'd have no friends.
Absolutely right.
Or your family would have deserted you. So it's business practice wrong. The actual things that you do are not that weird. I mean, you know, when we make corporate changes, we communicate them really, really well, and we put lots of FAQs, and we listen to people's feedback at night, and you know, we give lots of channels for communication back. What's so weird about that? That's not. You know, I mean, it is rebellious because people don't do it, but it's it's not controversial.
Yeah.
We say thank you to people a lot. Yeah, I spend a little bit of time. My colleague Greg Liederman, he's got a great new book called Craved just coming out, which is all about recognition, and it's subtitled 10 Minutes by Friday, which is just about starting a new culture of recognition by having your exec team start by just 10 every week by Friday, spend 10 minutes thinking about someone in the organization who you may have overlooked, or you just need to say thank you to, or write a short note to.
Love
just
that.
10 minutes, all it takes. No money, or even any cash, just need note and some little personal note. Makes a world of difference to them. And I think, is that rebellious? Yes, because most organizations don't do it. Is it controversial? Well, I was taught to say thank you to people when I was a child by my mum,
Yep.
and write thank you notes. So it's not that controversial. It's just for some reason, somehow we were misled that if you come to work because we get paid to come to work, all the normal sensibilities of being human don't apply. But it turns out that they do, because it's the same people who are at work who are at home.
Right, absolutely. Surprise!
They haven't turned into a different beast. So, if people get upset at home by being kept in the dark and not listened to, funnily enough, they get upset at work by being kept in the dark and not listened to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So all you got to do is stop doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're the things that we need to do as organisations.
Yeah, absolutely. So that being the case, I mean, obviously you've got the employee bridge model, or the engagement bridge model rather. It seems quite obvious to you, and I think, having read the book, some of the things you say, they're pretty pragmatically obvious. But just tell us what some of the some things you say in the book. What are some of the things that you've seen are the kind of first things organisations, if they're going to start approaching this seriously, should start to look at?
So the bridge model, it's a 10-point model. So there are 10 things that you can look at. We always say there's no official starting point, because it depends on where you are as an organisation, depends on your context, what you've done in the past, what feels important, but it also depends on what you've got control of.
Yeah.
Because I don't, in a kind of classic consultant's theoretical model, you'd probably start with mission, purpose, and values, which is one of the items. So, let's start there, because if you can't do that, then where are you going? The problem is that the person you're talking to might not have control of that, or it might have just been done 2 years ago, and you're going to go back and do it again. So what we always say is, start where you can start Monday, because the biggest enemy of employee engagement change is inertia. It's people having a meeting every 2 months about it, but actually not making any positive change. I think the places where organizations commonly start is in communications and in recognition. They're quite easy places to start. They can be quite easy places to start in, because they're basically attitudinal. I mean, when you think about recognition, and I think about recognition as recognition and visibility, it's just about, human beings have an intrinsic need to be seen and to be visible.
Yeah.
So if someone's at work and they feel that they're ignored, and their boss or whoever, no one knows that they're there, and no one seems to care if they're there or not.
Yeah.
They'll start behaving like no one cares if they're there or not.
Right.
Yeah? So they'll do the basics. They'll keep their head down, and they'll leave at 5 or 6 whenever the right time is.
Yeah.
And they'll do what's asked of them, but they're not going to do anything extra or care enough to make change happen.
Yeah.
So recognition and visibility is straightforward. I always say, Reward Gateway sells all manner of recognition technology, which our sales team would love to sell to everybody, and is very good at selling normally. However, frankly, you don't really need it, because if you want to get started on recognition, I just buy the exec team a bunch of thank you cards, some stamps, and give them access to the HR system for people's home addresses.
Right.
Because nothing. No award, cash award, or prize, or anything is as meaningful as a handwritten personal letter sent home from someone that you weren't expecting it.
Right.
And also very close to that, very, very effectively close to that, is a phone call. I remember being in New York several years ago, and at the time we had an in-house TV program called Global Briefing that ran every fortnight. And I was in New York. I was actually at a Cyber Senate conference that day.
Right.
And in the break, I'd watched this week's Global Briefing on my phone. And it was just a great episode. It's like a really amazing episode. It was really informative about what was going on in the company. It was just really, really good. The production, the team who put it together was really good. And there was 4 people involved in that episode, and I just called them all in the break, just as I say, "Hey, it's Glenn here." So I'm the CEO at that time. So they kind of, that's unusual that CEO calls them out of the blue. And I just said, I'm just calling to say that was an amazing episode of Global Briefing, and thank you very much for it. And I was just really wowed by it, and well done. Awesome. That's the only reason I called. And it's funny, all of them sort of said, "Oh, thank you very much," to put the phone down. And then by the end of the day, all 4 of them had separately sent me an email saying that was the most amazing call I've ever had, and it's completely made my month, and I'm so grateful for you calling. And it's like, what did that cost me? It cost me nothing. It took 5 minutes.
Right.
And I think, the interesting thing about employee recognition is the tools are ludicrously simple. I mean, frankly, it could be a post-it note and a Mars bar left on someone's desk. It hasn't got to be,
right.
Anything. The problem is that a lot of people in business, managers and leaders, they have grown up in a world where they don't understand why you should say thank you to people or why you should be appreciative. I know there are some managers and leaders think it makes them look weak, which is absolutely ludicrous. And we just need to get out of that mindset. So, the thing which is most effective with clients actually is not like have they bought the most amazing recognition technology, because there's loads of great recognition technology about if you want to use it. It's actually have they taken the time to sit down with managers and leaders in the business and actually get them to understand why it's important, and how to use it. That's what's kind of key.
And it's funny when you say it sounds so obvious, doesn't it? And yet,
it's really obvious.
It's this thing of, well, also we live in such an over complex world, and we over complicate it as well. That, I mean, let's face it, if you would send a thank you card home to someone's home, and how often do we get meaningful snail mail these days?
I mean, my blog, my GlennElliott.me blog is built and maintained by a little web agency called Make in East London, and they do a great job. Small team, they're lovely. They're always making improvements for me and staff, and they're really responsive, and I love working with them. And so a couple of weeks ago, I was on my favourite chocolate company's website, which is Love Cocoa, a lovely little ethical small batch chocolate company in London. And I just saw a 6-pack of chocolate bars on it. I was like, oh, I'll send them to the guys at Make as a little thank you gift. And I like using this chocolate brand, Love Cocoa, because they always handwrite the message. So if you type a little message into the website, and they handwrite it on the card, which is really sweet.
Lovely.
So I just sent that to Make unexpectedly, and you guys get a lovely response back, and it shows them that I care about them and I'm grateful. And some people would think, well, they're a supplier, they get paid, that's enough. But it's not enough. I mean, it's enough if you want the basics, but if it's also just not very nice. And it's like, what did it cost me? £15 or something?
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
like nothing. And I just think you've got to think about not only that. I often think, like, who do you want to be when you go to bed? Do you want to be do you want to go to bed as the kind of ball breaker boss who shouts at everybody and thinks he's getting great, results from being meanie, or do you want to go to bed as the person that everyone loves working for? And I always really wanted to be the latter. It doesn't mean that you don't have to. It doesn't mean that you don't make hard decisions sometimes.
No.
You don't take people out of jobs. It doesn't mean you don't. I must have fired or made redundant hundreds of people in my career, because you're building a successful business and a successful team, and in a fast-growing business, you often have to tell people this is as far as you can go with us. You've done a great job, and it's now time to move on and do something else. We need different skills. So it's not about being a pushover or anything like that. It's about being decent, fair, honest, respectful, grateful, communicating well, being consistent. It's about those things.
Yeah.
Being a leader.
That makes complete sense. Yeah. Let's turn the tables to you, as it were, because you've also got this point of view, but you've been a successful entrepreneur yourself. I think that's also interesting as well. Where do you draw your inspiration from? What kind of lights up your fire, as it were?
That's interesting. My inspiration from, I don't know. I mean, I'm a big learner. I've kind of, my friend Joe Gaunt, who runs Hero Wellbeing, he always taught me that every day is a learning day. So I've always been naturally very curious about things. So part of that comes from engineering, actually. The number of times I've been sitting with someone at a Mac and I've done something, and they're like, "Oh my God, how did you know that button did that?" And I'm like, "Well, I clicked on it and I found out,
Right.
pressed it." And they're like, "Oh." So I've always been naturally curious. Various, I kind of have like phases of becoming obsessed with TED Talks or not obsessed with TED Talks. I'm reading quite a lot at the moment.
What are you reading?
What am I reading? Oh, funny, I'm reading an odd book right now. I'm reading Bank 4.0 just started, which is about the future of banking. And that's not a normal book for me to read because I'm not interested in banking, if I'm honest. I want to learn more about AI and that sort of stuff.
Ooh, have you read Life 3.0?
No, but I've bought it and I
Worth
haven't
reading.
read it.
Great
I
book,
bought
really
it, and
good.
it's in the bedroom, so it's close to the bed, which is going to get read.
It's going to make it.
It will make it there. I also just bought just this week. I bought a book called Hired, which is an investigative journalist's report on. He spent 6 months working in low-wage Britain, working in warehouses and things. So I read the first chapter of that last night. I mean, the sort of books that have been really pivotal to me, I think, over the past few years are things like Brené Brown. I was fortunate enough to see Brené Brown talk in a conference in Boston. I'd never ever heard of her, and she got up on stage and taught did this sort of keynote speech, and she just brought me over. She was just amazing. She was absolutely the most amazing storyteller. And I think at that time she had all three of her books in the New York Times top 10 bestsellers at the same time, which is just insane.
Yeah.
So Brené Brown's really amazing. Margaret Heffernan has been a real source of inspiration.
Oh, I love Margaret Heffernan.
She's
fantastic.
Amazing. Yeah, I just sometimes on a Saturday morning I'll just stick TED on and type in Heffernan and watch anything she's done. I was really grateful she was kind enough to endorse my book Build It, which was really, really cool. So Heffernan's great. Paddy McCord, who was the chief talent officer at Netflix.
Yep.
Now I was fortunate enough to meet Paddy a few years ago at a conference. We've met several times since, and she's a great person to have on your podcast because she's an utter maverick rebel, completely down to earth, very pragmatic, and what she did at Netflix was just amazing. She had 14 years there, completely inverting everything that was normally done in HR. And doing it differently and building an incredible people organisation there. There's some of the people that have kind of inspired me, I guess.
Awesome. And you, as you say, last year you stepped down as the CEO. You're now kind of founder, and you're kind of doing a lot of speaking, building. What's next for you? Where are you heading?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. When I was CEO, I often said I've got the best job in the world, and I definitely thought I did have the best. Running this business for 11 and a half years was a real privilege. It was a massive challenge, but a real privilege. I worked with incredible people. It was amazing seeing them grow. But it was ultimately a really tough job because being CEO of a decent sized organization is tough and never ending. So I thought I had the best job in the world. I'm now definitely certain I've got the best job in the world now because there's another man who's now CEO of Rebel Gateway, a guy called Doug Butler, who is just wonderful, lovely guy, and I couldn't be happier to have handed over the reins of the business to him. So I have no exec responsibility here at all. I'm not on the board. I'm a shareholder still, but I'm on an ordinary staff contract, and just like everybody else, which I just love. So I speak to Doug normally every week. We'll talk about whatever he wants to talk about, and I'll tell him whatever I think. But I expect most of my advice to be ignored because it's his show, it's not mine.
Yeah.
Which is cool. So what I'm doing is I try to help anyone inside the company or outside that needs it. So it's really nice. I'm very fortunate. Rebel Gateway pays my salary and has given me a budget to run my founder's office. So I have no sales targets. I have no metrics. I have nothing.
Wicked.
I'm just completely free with the world. So I often bump into CEOs or leaders or HR people who are trying to do something with employee engagement, and if we get on, I'll just try to help them in any way I can. I speak at conferences. I've got back into writing again. I took a little writing break after finishing Build It. So I was a bit burnt out from that.
Yeah.
And I'm back into writing again on my blog, which I'm really loving. I'm kind of, I'm trying. And if I'm honest, I'm trying to be the most honest version of myself that I can. And one of the things which is nice about not being CEO is, when you're CEO of a business with 2,000 clients, it can be hard sometimes to be completely honest publicly, because nearly every single business is either a client or maybe become a client, or we're hoping they're going to become a client. So you have to, really be careful. You have to, there's even just little things like, you want to rant on Twitter about a delivery that was missed, and you can't because the delivery companies are clients and you don't want to offend them. I'm a bit more distant now, so I can be a little bit more honest about what I think about things. I wrote an article last week about what I thought about Wonga for the administration. I'm just doing a 2-part investigative piece on Amazon called "Can We Shop at Amazon with a Clear Conscience?" So I'm in a fortunate position of being a bit insulated from the business, being a little bit separate from it now. So I I want to talk about culture, leadership, the future of work, my worries about the future of work as well, in a really honest way. I'm trying to live my truth.
Awesome. I love that. Well, thank you so much for your time today,
Pleasure.
Glenn. I think, there's been so much stuff there, just lots of wisdom and just lots of, good down-to-earth common sense, I think.
Thank you.
I think that's my biggest takeaway, that actually most of this is actually...
It's not rocket science, is it?
No, absolutely. So thank you so much for your time today. Thanks for being on the podcast. And Mavericks, thanks for listening in. That was Mr. Glenn Elliott, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time on the Mavericks Unlimited podcast. Bye for now.
Bye.
Hey, listen up. Don't go yet. Did you get something meaningful out of this episode? Well, the most meaningful thing that you can do right now is to go and leave a review on iTunes, because those reviews are what keep us here. And please make sure to share and to subscribe to this podcast. Finally, are you unleashing your superpowers? Well, if so, show us on Instagram with the hashtag Mavericks Unlimited, and we'll see you over there. And with that, thanks so much for listening to the Mavericks Unlimited podcast at mavericsunlimited.com. Bye for now.